Hi friends, it's been a very hot minute since I've talked to you last. In the last video that I did, I talked about how I was graduating and that was sort of going to be my focus. I talked about my goals of the month, and then sooner or later, midterms turned to finals, turned to tests, and like all of our exams this past semester have been online. Suddenly they decided that we would take our finals in person for the first time since 2020. Like, it was just a very interesting and crazy change of dynamic, but I am really happy and excited to be sitting down with you guys now that school's out of the way. I can sort of sit here, focus on pushing out content for everybody, which is what I've really wanted to focus on this year anyways, sort of figure my stuff out. So I'm really excited to be here, long story short. So this video is going to be the first in my series, which is where I read the book and then watch its adaptation, whether it be a TV show or a movie. And this video I'm going to be covering Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. It was a 2017 novel, which was then adapted to a short Netflix TV series. It's only about 6 episodes, with each episode being like 50 minutes each, but I wanted to read the book before I started the TV show and sort of experience it, so that way I'm able to compare and contrast to you guys, which is better, because I was actually surprised whenever I found out a lot of people didn't know that it was a book before it was made into a TV show. So I think it's going to be interesting for everybody to sort of hear the differences, or like what I think about it. And yeah, so that's the plan for this video. So first, I'm obviously going to be talking about the first thing that I did, which was I read the book. And by read, I actually listened to it via Audible. I found that that works a lot better for me, to just be able to listen to a book as I like get ready in the morning, or as I'm driving to and from like my chiropractor's appointments, to and from work, whatever. I was actually able to whip it out pretty fast, so that's really exciting. I know that I wouldn't have gotten it done if I just tried to sit down and read it. So I was really excited whenever I saw it on Audible, and whenever I listened to like the sample, and I really liked the way the narrator sounded. So that's what I did first. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you guys. I had no idea what Behind Her Eyes was even about. All I know is that I was at Barnes & Noble with my mom, and she was like, oh, I've been wanting to like watch this TV show, like it's a Netflix thing. And I was like, that would be perfect to cover for my YouTube series, where I read the book first and then watch its adaptation. And I never really anticipated it to be the first thing in the series. I really wanted to finish on Lovely Bones first and watch the movie and do a comparison on that. But long story short, I wound up reading and finishing Behind Her Eyes. So like I sort of mentioned, I was not even sure what the book was about. I didn't read the little thing in the back. I didn't read like an excerpt. I didn't read what the Netflix series was about. I didn't read anything on it. I just sort of bought it and decided to roll with it. So even listening to the book, I had no idea what to even expect, what the book was even about. So I was going into it more or less completely blind and not even sure where the story was supposed to go, what the genre was supposed to be, etc. So I am going to try to keep most of this comparison spoiler free, but with this sort of talking about it, just know that at some point I will talk about the huge twist at the end, and I'm really glad that it wasn't spoiled for me. So I encourage anybody that's listening to this that hasn't watched the show or hasn't read the book to go do that, come back. I'll still be here chilling, hanging out for you to watch this like later, but I'll give it definitely a bigger spoiler warning right before I get into like the super intense parts. To start off, it is a first person changing point of views for the most part, and I will say that Sarah does it really well. And it follows Louise, who is a single mother, who her now ex-husband has a new fiance / girlfriend that is now pregnant, and also it's getting to the point where their son is old enough now that they're both wanting to spend equal amounts of time with each other. So actually the story sort of starts right off the bat where her ex-husband is taking their son on a trip to France with the new woman in her life. And then on the opposite end, it also follows Adele, who is sort of the new girl on the block, I guess. Her husband is a psychiatrist, and it's sort of a new, fresh start in the town that they live in. So how it starts is Louise is out at a bar where she meets this very handsome man, and they sort of hit it off, and they almost have like a hookup moment before the man stops and he says, like, I can't do this, I'm so sorry. And essentially he has a wife, which is why he can't hook up with her. So then it's sort of like a failed hookup. She's pretty embarrassed, but the plot gets a little bit messier whenever she starts her new job, realizes that the man that she had her moment in the bar with is now her boss. She started at a psychiatrist's office. She's a receptionist. It even gets messier because then Louise runs into Adele, who Adele is her boss's wife. So it gets really messy, and I watched a few videos on it, and a lot of people think that a lot of the issues in this book or in this series could have been avoided if Louise just minded her own business, which I'm not going to argue with that. And it definitely is a very messy sort of storyline, and not knowing where it was going, you could sort of just assume that by reading the excerpts, it's like a girl hooks up with a man that's married and the wife is crazy sort of thing. But it is so much more convoluted and deeper than all of that, which whenever I started to read it / listen to it, I truly thought that the book was going somewhere else, because all I was under the impression was that Adele was a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, for lack of a better term, and I just thought that it was going to be, because her storyline was that her parents had died in a fire, she had survived, and her husband was the one that saved her from the fire. I thought it was going to wind up being she actually started the fire that killed her parents. That's not it, I promise you. It's not like this run-of-the-mill ending. It is such a twisted ending that I promise you guys is so worth it. I was really a fan of the writing in this. It changes first-person point of views between Adele and Louise, and then there's also flashback chapters that feature Adele whenever she was at this rehabilitation program where we meet another very important character, Robert. And the flashback chapters are actually told in third-person point of view, so it's talking like Adele looked at Robert and stuff like that. It's not Adele explicitly stating that she's looking at Robert. If I'm not making sense, it's because it's been a day, and if I look greasy, it's because I am greasy at this point. Like, what the... Bear with me. So, I do think that Sarah Pinborough pulls this off very well. The switching first-person point of views, it's very hard to pull off, and I feel like with a lot of situations, some authors aren't able to pull it off as well as she does, and it truly is looking at the world through the character's eyes. So whenever you're in Louise's chapters, you don't know all of the things that Adele knows about David, her husband, and it's sort of like we're figuring out a lot about Adele and David through Louise, and it's not just like told explicitly to us. Like, we don't really know what they're about in the beginning, and it's sort of a very fun experience to get to learn it as Louise learns it, because even in Adele's chapter, switching over to Adele, it's like still very mysterious and sort of we get the experience of Adele not being the most trustworthy of narrators, and she's also sort of trying to save her marriage in a very questionable way, and in just a way that makes you feel like unnerved. So I do really like how well it is shown. You could definitely tell they're two very strong and very different voices, that it's never really was an issue to figure out who was talking just by the verbiage that Sarah Pinborough was able to pull off in each of the ways that they spoke and saw the world. It was very clearly stated and very well done. Now, I did listen to it on Audible, like I sort of said, so I think I struggled a little bit with the then scenes, like the flashback scenes. It was a little bit jarring to, especially in the beginning before I was able really to figure out what the hell was going on. It was like, I was just very confused, and it didn't come across well to me. And like I said, it was a little bit interesting to experience, but I guess if I had a grievance, but that's also sort of on me because I wasn't reading it on paper. I think it probably comes across a lot clearer on paper to have like a chapter titled then and then start in third person. It just wasn't very clear to me as a listener right away. It was a little bit confusing. So what I really liked about the characters that are introduced in Behind Her Eyes, especially in the book, is that I started sort of wondering like, oh, I wonder who my favorite character is going to be. Towards the middle, I was like, I don't know who my favorite character is. And at the end, I was like, I don't know who my favorite character is, which I think is not a bad thing at all. And each of the characters in this book are very tragically flawed in a way that you like love them, but can also see how each of them are their own shitty little people. Like Louise doesn't know how to mind her business. Adele doesn't know how to manage her emotions really well, which, spoiler alert, it's not really Adele, which is very mindfucky because it's really Robert that's in Adele. It's a wild ride. And if you've seen the TV show, you know what I mean. Yeah, and then it was like, and David cheats on his wife. And for a long time, you're also seeing David through Louise's eyes, and Louise is hearing from Adele, or being insinuated that David beats Adele. And it's just like, oh, like, I don't like David because he's a wife beater, but it's just this huge convoluted, and then sort of like, I thought I liked Robert, and then I found out what was really going on with Robert, and I was like, ooh, I was like, it's just this big mess, to say the least. And I really liked that about it, still to this day, to this very moment. It's like, I don't know if I have a favorite character in the book, which is a rarity for me because I always sort of find somebody to like, whether it's like the bad guy, the good guy, the misfit, like the person in the middle. Like, I just always have a favorite, and in this one I don't really have a favorite, which was really interesting. I think. Take a minute to get some Kool-Aid. So now I'm sort of going to move into the more boring grievances with this book. So it was kind of intimidating to me whenever I saw it on Audible because it was over 13 hours, I believe, to listen to it, which as somebody like me, I'm sort of like, well, it only takes me 20 minutes to get to work, so that's only 40 minutes, potentially a day of listening to this book, but it was really easy to get through. It was a longer, more intimidating book for me personally, as somebody that hasn't really read all year. And that sort of leads into my major grievance with this book, is that it takes a very, very, very long time to get to the point. It's just like, we have this almost hookup moment with David and Louise, and then she goes to work, find out they're the boss, and then it's like this building and rising like sexual tension, I guess you could say. And it's like this huge like crescendo, and I don't really know if it took 3 hours, but it could have been 3 minutes. It definitely wasn't 3 minutes, but it could have taken 3 hours or less. But it was like, it felt like it was 3 hours until they finally had their hookup moment, and then we got there and I was like, yes, like, we're finally there. And then I swear, like, it felt like the next chapter with Louise, it was like, it's now 10 days later and me and David have hooked up 3 times, and I was like, what? I was like, we just spent 3 hours getting to this point for you to be like, oh, by the way, like, this happened a few more times and now we're here now. And it was just like, so that was kind of jarring. And then sort of we have this relationship building with Louise and Adele, and it's like building, and then like we have chapters with Adele saying she doesn't like Louise, and she knows that Louise is up to no good, and she's like putting aside money to buy Louise like a vape / e-cigarette. And then it's literally like we build, and then all of a sudden it's just like the e-cigarette thing is just sprinkled in randomly in Louise's chapter, and she's just like, and I've stopped smoking cigarettes. And it's like, oh, okay, well, fuck me, I guess we're here. And it's honestly not like this big Stephen King novel thriller. Like, it's not The Shining, where you're building up to this inevitable, like, boss fight, for lack of a better term. It's sort of like there's not any physical violence in this book, which is in no way a bad thing or something that I don't like. If a book has, like, violence, like, my whole freaking first book is violence out to wazoo, so it's not, like, about that. But it is also interesting to see a thriller that doesn't have this big, huge, gory, like, fight scene with people, like, punching each other in the face, and there's not murders happening every 5 seconds. It's just very lots of talking to the big plot twist, and then it's like, oh, we're there, but then it's not like it's this big, huge, like, brawl with people fighting at that point. So it is definitely a slower book. It takes a lot to kick into it, but it is sort of worth the journey, I guess you could say, once you get there and once things slowly start to, like, snowball. But again, if you're looking for this big, huge, like, fight scene and fires blazing, which that's a bad metaphor because there is a fire. There's a big point about fire, but you know what I mean. Like, it's not like this big final boss fight, essentially, and it's not like this big, huge murder mystery. The twist makes up for it because it's not what you expect. On the same breath of that, it's not at all what you expect. So I did really like the book. Like I said, it's sort of, the over 13-hour listen time really intimidated me, but before I knew it, like, I wanted to listen to it as I drove even to the bank, and sort of whenever I came into my house, I wanted to lay down in bed and listen to it. Like, it was very easy to get through. It was a fast read for the most part. Didn't take it. If it took me 13 hours, it definitely did not feel like it was a 13-hour journey. And I also figured out that you can speed up the narrator's voice, so that really helps me get through it. So now moving on to the TV show. So sort of my grievances with the book was all relieved with the TV series. I don't know if it's technically a TV series. Netflix series. Whatever. The adaptation. So it was only told in 6 episodes, each being about 50 minutes, I think, each. So now I'm sort of going to break down the TV show and my thoughts on the TV show. So what I'm about to tell you, just keep in mind, I'm going to contradict myself in literally, like, 2 minutes' time. So whenever I read a book, very rarely do I make up my own images for the characters. So most often than not, the character is literally just a name in my head. Like, I don't really listen or read a book and see a movie in my head. It's just sort of like blank blobs. In the same breath, I imagined David as more of a dark-haired Dan Stevens, and that's not what I got. Like, I was just sort of looking at him during the entire show, and I was like, yeah, he's cute, like, he's attractive, he's this big, tall man that seems to tower over everybody, which is how he's described in the books, but he's also not Dan Stevens. I think Dan Stevens would have been great in that role, but yeah. And then, sort of, again, contradicting myself in the same breath, I had absolutely nobody in mind for Adele, but she's also not what I expected her to look like in the series. Like, what I got was not it. I expected Adele to sort of look a little less crazy behind the eyes. I expected her to look more mundane and this beautiful, beautiful woman, but whenever I see her in the TV shows, I'm sort of like, oh yeah, there's something a little off there. She seems a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like, it doesn't even need to be implied. She just looks a little off her rocker. And once I tell you this, you're not going to be able to unsee it. Please tell me. I would be fully willing to believe that if you showed me a picture of the woman that plays Adele and Cillian Murphy, you could probably convince me that they were siblings. You will never unsee that. Now you see Cillian Murphy whenever you look at her. She looks strangely like him, and that's all I can think of. Like, towards the last episode, I was like, man, she really looks like Cillian Murphy. Sorry. Killian. Also, I'm sort of indifferent with what they did for Adele, I guess you could say. I felt like in the book, Like I said, I just listened to it. I didn't read it with my own two eyes, but they kept going on, and her adjectives often at times were chubby and overweight and fat. And like that's sort of what I went into my mind thinking that I was going to see like a more like slim thick girl. And it was just like constantly beat down our throats like she has this mom body. And even Louise was like, oh, I need to like lose like a stone. I love the British terminology. She was like, I need to lose like all this weight. I need to go to the gym. And then it was like in comparison to Adele, who was like this real skinny, beautiful, effervescent girl that was like gorgeous and everybody wanted her. And then it was like, here's ugly old Adele. Essentially, that's really how it came across in the books to me. And then to see her in the series, she is absolutely beautiful. She is not chubby or fat at all, not even remotely a little bit. And the fact that she was like, oh, I need to like lose weight, it was like, no girl. I was like, you don't. So that was just like a little weird detail that seemed a little off to me. I don't think that it would have been right necessarily either to make it like a body image issue. That was one thing that I really liked in the book though, was that moments in the first few times that Louise and David were hooking up, that Louise would sort of like look at Adele and see how petite she was, and then she would be scared that maybe David was now comparing their two bodies, and just like how stressed out and how insecure she was in her own body and how she really wanted to be Adele, essentially. It was really interesting. It came across a lot better than I think it did in the TV series personally, because that was another thing. I feel like in the book it was Louise wasn't really sketched out by Adele much at all, but literally in the TV series they literally smash into each other, and automatically Louise is like, who is this wacko? And then we sort of see that scene where she's walking away from Adele, and Adele texts her and she's like, this is me, and Louise is just like weirded out by her. Like, it's just like, in the TV series you can automatically sort of tell something's incorrect. While as I was reading the book, I just thought it was like, oh, like Adele is slightly off her rocker, but that's because she has a husband that doesn't love her. Like, I had just like no idea the complexities that were going to come with it. Which also sort of ties back into my issue with the book, was that with a TV series you don't really have 3 hours to build up to a hookup moment. The audience literally just wants to see the messiness that comes through, so you don't really need all of this building. And also going back to the characters, I don't really know what I imagined Robert to look like. Again, I say that they're like blobs in my head, but I also sort of kind of maybe imagined more of like a Toby from Pretty Little Liars and not so much Boy in the Striped Pajamas for Robert. I don't know. So I really enjoy YouTube commentator Dylan Is Not in Trouble. And I really liked his commentary whenever he had read The Fault in Our Stars before he watched the movie. And he said that some things in TV shows or movies just hit different in a way that a book cannot. And I feel like that's definitely the way that I feel about Behind Her Eyes. Because, like I said, the book took forever to get to the climax, and it's just sort of like listening to the dialogue back and forth, or reading the dialogue back and forth between these small like clusters of characters. But whenever you have the TV show or the movie or whatever it is, it's like you have this visual on top of you're seeing an actual embodiment of a character moving and talking. You have set designs. You're not just like reading about Adele sitting in her house. Like, you can actually see Adele sitting in her house with all the extra stuff like in the background, and like all the set designs, and like all of the lighting can really make or break a scene. And sort of you're able to tell right off the bat within David and Louise's first hookup moment that something is watching in on them by the camera angles, and sort of things can be pulled off a lot more efficiently with just a good music selection. And that is sort of where I think sometimes the TV shows are better, or the movies, because there's just certain looks that can't be pulled off in descriptors in a book. Another thing that I really liked about the TV show was how great of an actor the little boy that played Adam was, because sort of at the end of the book, it was like, huge spoiler alert about the big twist at the end. So it sort of comes to us suddenly that Adele is not really Adele. Adele is Robert, or Robert in Adele's body, and Adele is essentially dead at the bottom of the well. Comes to us very suddenly and doesn't come to us until after Robert has now ditched Adele's body, but is now in Louise's body. And it sort of is just a very sudden revelation, and then sort of like, it's like, the reason that he did it was because he wanted to be close with David and wanted David to be his, essentially, which is why Adele has had all of these problems and has scared away all of these people, was because it was really Robert wanting David. But in the TV show, it was amazing to see sort of how each actor took hold of their part, and sort of how whenever Robert went into Louise's body, just like this super, super dark embodiment comes over Louise, and like you could just tell the difference in like even her eyes and all of this stuff. So in the book, she and David get married pretty much instantly, and that's whenever they're like talking about going on their honeymoon, and she's like, oh, like maybe we can go on a cruise, and Adam pipes out from the back saying like, you don't like cruises, like you don't like the water. And that sort of shows Robert's first inclination of wanting to get rid of Adam to the audience, and it was literally so amazing to me and made everything worth it to witness how the actresses and the actors were able to portray all of this like so well in it, that in the book it was just sort of like Robert took over and everybody just now believes, it doesn't see anything off, essentially. But then we had this scene where Louise / Rob picks up Adam from Ian's place, and you could just tell by the way that Adam hangs back and is so indifferent and can just tell that something is off, that really sold it for me. And then to sort of see with my own two eyes how batshit Robert is able to make Louise look now that he's inside of Louise's body, it was just like perfect. Literally, it made it all worth it, like I said. And those are just some things, honestly, that you cannot pull off in a book. Like, that's just that on that. Like, you can sit there and tell me the way that Adam hesitated in the door, and the way that Adam seemed to be afraid of Louise, and the way that Ian seemed to be very indifferent about letting his son go back with his mother. But it doesn't, nothing compares to the way that the TV show pulls off. I'm sorry, okay? That's that on that. So now, let's talk about which is better, the TV show or the book. I am going to say that the series was better. The book, I'm telling you, is amazing. I really loved the prose in the book. I really loved the way that it flowed. I really loved the way that Sarah Pinborough pulled off the changing point of views first person. I thought the characters were really well developed and designed, but ultimately I think I liked the TV series better. I will put flat out right here between just you and me. Look at my eyes. Episode 5 was horrendous. My mom called me dramatic because I said that if I didn't know the twist ending, and if I didn't know how great of a plot twist it was, I would have probably stopped watching the show. I don't know what it was about episode 5, but it was absolute trash. That's that on that. So if you're going to watch this video and go watch the series, just know that me, Noir, hates episode 5. It was boring. It felt like I was listening to the first 3 hours of that book all over again for some reason. I don't know why. That's about my only agreements with the TV show. And also that Dan Stevens is in it. Oh my god, I'm so tired. But no, Honestly, that is that. I mean, I thought that the TV show was just amazing. And everything was executed so well. The cast was amazing. Like I said, I had never really even seen these actors or actresses in anything other than Behind Her Eyes. I actually want to say that I looked up their sort of filmography or whatever, and I want to say the guy that plays Robert was in The Empty Man, which I watched, was sort of underwhelmed by that, so I don't remember him being in it. But yeah, so I was really impressed. Soundtrack was pretty good. The like opening little like credits, which is not even like really credits, but the like, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know, the thing that's the title card, I guess. That always like made me very uneasy. Like I just always looked forward to the new episode. It was very bingeable, and sort of goes back to one of my only grievances about the book was that with a TV series, you have to sort of take the audience by the throat and like throw them into this journey. There's really no time to be like building up. It's like, no, I have 6 episodes to tell this whack out of left field story about affairs, people not minding their business, astral projecting, everything, addiction, marital issues, family issues, single mom issues, work drama. I have to tell all of this in 6 episodes, so there's no time to just be like twiddling our thumbs. I don't know. There is something beautiful about building a world in a book and sort of knowing every single thing about a character before we get to like a climax. Wasn't necessarily for me. Like I said, once it sort of got to the point of things sort of snowballing and sort of leading us to something greater, I was in on it. But those first few hours, man, I was struggling. And that's putting it lightly. But yeah, that's how I feel. Like it was a pretty close tie. Even last night I finished watching it. My mom had watched the series and then sort of like listened to it intermittently with me. So it was sort of like she knew the twist and then got to listen to the book and then she got to watch it again. I am really excited to sort of go back and to rewatch the series and maybe even re-listen to the book to sort of pick up on little things. And that is what's really beautiful about the book and the series, is that it's like one of those things that you finish and you automatically want to go and watch it again and pick up on things that you might have missed, or to pick up on signs that were like right in front of your face. And that's what's really beautiful about it, is that it was this twist that I don't think has ever been done before. You can feel free to tell me about, spoiler alert, another book or TV show where, how do I even wrap this twist up, where a woman's parents die in a fire, okay? She goes essentially to a mental health unit, a rehabilitation unit, meets a guy in there that is gay, doesn't like her, comes home with her, more or less, meets her fiance, suddenly decides he's in love with the fiance, while also having his own sleep issues that the woman is helping him with, uses those tips to swap bodies with this girl, take over her body, dump his old self in the well, so now he's in this woman's body, try to get her husband to stay in love with her. Said husband loses interest, more or less, so then she's over here losing her mind, going more and more off her rocker, trying to get rid of anybody that even breathes in this man's direction, and eventually befriends the person that her husband is having an affair with, to essentially get her to also have out-of-body experiences, so that way they could take over her body, and now get rid of the other one, and now try to get with the husband. It's just like, tell me another book that happens, and I don't know, I'll give you all the kudos, I guess, and you get to say that you proved me wrong. I don't know. So that is sort of my synopsis on Behind Her Eyes. I definitely recommend it to anybody that hasn't watched it, hasn't read it yet, feel free to tell me in the comments if you agree with my opinion and if you think that the series was better, or if you thought the book was better. Tell me why. We can hash it out in the comments. I am truly, honestly, so excited to be back talking to you guys, to be sat here. I do like this sort of setup. I can sit on the floor. I have my Ookie Spooky movie mixtiles back here. We have Final Destination 3 going on. I have my cute little friend. Her name's Violet. I've been loving collecting Squishmallows, so she's my little baby. I also have Sully over here. He was kind of kicked off to the side. But sort of have this new setup where I can sit on the floor, hang out, talk with you guys. I'm not standing up on my feet. But yeah, it feels really good just to hang out again, to update you guys. And I hope you liked sort of what I have to say or enjoyed this first video back. I am very excited because next week I am going to hopefully have a video up. No, I'm going to manifest. You guys are going to have a video next week where I actually watched 13 Reasons Why, and then I read the book, and I'm going to compare and contrast and decide which one I like better. And I have a lot to say about that bloody series. So, if that's something you're going to be interested in, definitely stay tuned. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you like my mediocre personality, I guess, to listen to me ramble incoherently to the point that I don't even make sense, don't know where my thoughts are going. Feel free to tell me that my opinion sucks in the comments. Yeah, that's it. So I will see you guys super soon. Thank you for all that have stayed subscribed to me. If you're interested in my super violent books that I talked about, links are going to be down there. Find me on social media, Noir Hayes on everything, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, the whole shindig, the whole song and dance. I will talk to you guys in the next video. Until then, I'll see you on my social medias. Bye, friends!